The Hundred Years' War stands as one of the most transformative conflicts in medieval European history, stretching across more than a century from 1337 to 1453. To truly understand this epic struggle, we must first immerse ourselves in the world of 14th and 15th century Western Europe, a landscape dominated by rival kingdoms and ancient feudal claims. Picture yourself in medieval France, where this devastating conflict primarily unfolded. The main theaters of war spanned across the fertile lands of northern France, through the rich vineyards of Aquitaine in the southwest, and across the strategic waters of the English Channel. Each region played a crucial role in this complex chess game of medieval warfare. The northern French plains, with their vast open fields, became the stage for some of history's most famous battles, including Crécy and Agincourt. The wealthy region of Aquitaine, long held by English kings as a duchy, represented both the source and the prize of many disputes. Meanwhile, the English Channel served as both a protective moat for England and a vital route for military supplies and trade. The political landscape was equally intricate. At its core, the conflict emerged from a tangled web of feudal relationships and dynastic claims. The English kings, who were technically vassals of the French crown for their continental possessions, had grown increasingly powerful and independent. Edward III of England's claim to the French throne through his mother Isabella, daughter of Philip IV of France, sparked the initial conflict. This complex political situation was further complicated by the emerging sense of national identity in both kingdoms, as feudal ties began to give way to more centralized state structures. Life during this period was a sensory tapestry that we can still imagine today. Massive stone castles dominated the landscape, their high walls and sturdy towers representing both military necessity and noble power. Towns and cities huddled behind protective walls, their streets echoing with the daily rhythms of medieval life. Church bells rang out the hours and called the faithful to prayer, while the cries of merchants and the rhythmic clang of blacksmiths' hammers filled the air. The smell of wood smoke from countless hearths mingled with the earthy scents of wet straw and tanned leather, while colorful banners and standards of noble houses fluttered in the wind, displaying the complex heraldry that identified different factions. The war period witnessed remarkable technological and military innovations that would reshape the nature of warfare. The English longbow emerged as a revolutionary weapon, capable of penetrating armor at long distances and dramatically changing battlefield tactics. This weapon, requiring years of training to master, created a new class of professional soldiers and challenged the dominance of mounted knights. Traditional plate armor evolved in response, becoming more sophisticated and articulated to provide better protection while maintaining mobility. This arms race between offensive and defensive technology pushed medieval engineering to new heights. Perhaps most significantly, this period saw the first widespread use of gunpowder weapons in Western European warfare. Early cannon, though primitive and unreliable, began to appear on battlefields and in sieges, marking the beginning of a military revolution that would eventually end the age of castles. These early firearms, while not yet decisive weapons, foreshadowed the dramatic changes that would transform warfare in the centuries to come. The social fabric of medieval society was profoundly affected by these developments. Knights had to adapt their traditional role as mounted warriors, while new military classes emerged, including professional archers and gunners. Castle architecture evolved to meet new threats, with walls growing thicker and lower to resist cannon fire. The war accelerated changes in military organization, leading to more professional armies and sophisticated logistics systems that would characterize early modern warfare. This rich historical context set the stage for a conflict that would reshape not just England and France, but the entire nature of European warfare and society. The Hundred Years' War marked the transition from medieval to early modern military tactics, from feudal to national political structures, and from a world of knights and castles to one of professional armies and gunpowder weapons. The epic saga of the Hundred Years' War was shaped by remarkable individuals whose personalities, ambitions, and decisions would forever alter the course of European history. Let us delve into the lives of these fascinating characters who played pivotal roles in this century-long conflict. Edward III of England emerged as the initial catalyst of this great war. Crowned at just 14 years old, he grew into one of medieval England's most formidable monarchs. Through his mother Isabella of France, Edward claimed legitimate right to the French throne, setting in motion events that would span generations. Known for his military prowess and charismatic leadership, Edward revolutionized English warfare and created the famous Order of the Garter. His military innovations, particularly the integration of longbowmen into his armies, proved devastating against French forces at battles like Crécy and Poitiers. Edward's reign marked the beginning of a new era in English military might, though his ambitious claim to the French crown would burden future generations with a seemingly endless conflict. Opposing Edward stood Philip VI of France, the first king of the House of Valois, whose ascension to the throne sparked the initial controversy. When the direct Capetian line ended, Philip's claim as the nearest male heir through the male line was challenged by Edward III's claim through his mother. Philip, though often overshadowed by his English rival in historical accounts, proved a capable defender of French interests. He successfully maintained French unity in the face of English aggression and laid the groundwork for the French resistance that would eventually emerge victorious. His early victories helped establish the legitimacy of the Valois dynasty, though the war he helped initiate would test his successors for over 100 years. Perhaps the most captivating figure of the entire war was Joan of Arc, the Maid of Orleans. Born to peasant parents in Domremy, her extraordinary journey from humble shepherdess to military commander remains one of history's most remarkable stories. Claiming divine guidance through visions of saints, Joan convinced the desperate Dauphin, later Charles VII, to allow her to lead an army to the besieged city of Orleans. Her arrival in 1429 dramatically turned the tide of the war. Despite her youth and lack of formal military training, Joan's passionate leadership and unwavering faith inspired the French troops to unprecedented victories. Her capture, show trial, and martyrdom at the hands of the English only served to strengthen her legend and the French cause she championed. Charles VII of France, often called the Victorious, began his reign as the derided King of Bourges, controlling only a small portion of his claimed realm. Initially dismissed as weak and indecisive, Charles proved to be a clever strategist who recognized talent in others, most notably in Joan of Arc. After her martyrdom, he continued her work of unifying France, implementing crucial military reforms and modernizing the French army. Under his leadership, France slowly but surely reclaimed its territories, eventually driving the English almost entirely from continental soil. His greatest achievement was transforming France from a feudal kingdom on the brink of collapse into a centralized nation-state. Among the antagonists, John of Lancaster, Duke of Bedford, stands out as a formidable opponent to the French cause. As regent for the young Henry VI of England, Bedford proved to be an exceptional administrator and military commander. He maintained English control over much of northern France through a combination of military skill and diplomatic finesse. His greatest challenge came with the emergence of Joan of Arc, whose successes threatened to undo years of English gains. Bedford's determination to destroy her influence led directly to her capture and execution, a decision that would ultimately backfire on the English cause. The Duke of Bedford's role in Joan of Arc's trial and execution remains one of the war's most controversial episodes. As the English regent in France, he orchestrated the political and legal machinery that would condemn her. The trial, though presented as a matter of religious orthodoxy, was clearly politically motivated. Bedford's decision to execute Joan as a heretic was intended to discredit both her and Charles VII, but instead created a martyr whose legend would inspire French resistance for generations to come. These key figures, each with their own strengths, flaws, and compelling stories, transformed what might have been a simple territorial dispute into an epic struggle that would help forge the national identities of both England and France. Their actions and decisions continue to fascinate historians and capture the imagination of people worldwide, demonstrating how individual personalities can shape the course of history. Through their triumphs and tragedies, we see not just the political and military aspects of the Hundred Years' War, but the very human drama that made it one of history's most compelling conflicts. The Hundred Years' War was far more than a series of battles and sieges. It represented a crucial turning point in European history, where medieval traditions clashed with emerging modern concepts. Let's explore the profound themes and conflicts that defined this transformative period. At its heart, this epic conflict centered on the question of dynastic legitimacy and royal power. The complex web of feudal relationships that had governed medieval Europe for centuries was being challenged by new ideas about monarchy and national sovereignty. When Edward III of England laid claim to the French throne through his mother Isabella, he wasn't just making a personal bid for power. He was challenging the entire French understanding of royal succession. The French Salic law, which prohibited inheritance through the female line, stood in direct opposition to Edward's claim. This fundamental disagreement about who had the right to rule would reshape how Europeans thought about royal authority and legitimate governance. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of the war was the emergence of national identity, a concept that would eventually transform medieval kingdoms into modern nation-states. Before the conflict, loyalty was primarily local and feudal, with nobles often holding lands in both England and France. However, as the war dragged on, people began to identify themselves more strongly as either English or French. Language played a crucial role in this transformation. The English nobility, which had spoken French since the Norman conquest, increasingly adopted English as their primary tongue. In France, The shared experience of resistance to English occupation helped forge a stronger sense of French identity. The transformation of medieval warfare during this period was nothing short of revolutionary. Traditional feudal armies, built around heavily armored knights and their personal retinues, gave way to more professional military forces. The English longbow, which could penetrate plate armor at considerable distances, challenged the supremacy of mounted knights. This wasn't just a technical innovation. It represented a social revolution in warfare, where common archers could defeat noble knights. The introduction of gunpowder weapons, though still primitive, signaled the beginning of an even more dramatic military transformation that would eventually end the age of castles and knights entirely. Faith and mysticism played an extraordinary role in the conflict, most dramatically embodied in the figure of Joan of Arc. In an age where divine right was taken literally, her claims of heavenly visions supporting the French cause had profound political implications. The English response, trying and executing her as a heretic, demonstrated how closely religion and politics were intertwined. The war period saw an increase in apocalyptic prophecies and religious fervor, as people sought to make sense of the seemingly endless conflict through supernatural explanations. The central conflict over the French crown evolved into something far more complex than a simple dynastic dispute. It became a struggle for territorial independence and sovereignty. The English king's traditional holdings in France, especially the rich Duchy of Aquitaine, complicated the relationship between the two kingdoms. Were English kings truly independent monarchs, or were they vassals of the French crown for their continental territories? This question challenged the very nature of feudal relationships and royal authority. The clash between different military styles reflected deeper cultural differences. The English emphasis on infantry and archery contrasted sharply with the French preference for heavy cavalry charges. These military choices reflected and reinforced different social structures. The English army relied more heavily on commoners, while the French army remained more firmly tied to noble cavalry. The success of English tactics at battles like Crécy and Agincourt forced a complete reimagining of warfare and social hierarchy. Imagine living in a medieval town claimed by both the English and French crowns. Your local lord might switch allegiances, your trade routes could be disrupted, and your very identity would be questioned. What factors would influence your loyalty? Would you side with the established French monarchy or the ambitious English claimants? Would practical concerns like trade and protection outweigh cultural and linguistic ties? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The conflict between feudal loyalty and national identity marked a crucial transition in European history. Traditional feudal bonds, based on personal relationships between lords and vassals, were being superseded by broader concepts of national allegiance. Towns and regions that had once balanced multiple loyalties were forced to choose sides. This transformation laid the groundwork for the modern system of nation-states, where citizenship and national identity would become primary markers of political belonging. The legacy of these themes and conflicts extends far beyond medieval Europe. The questions they raised, about legitimate authority, national identity, military innovation, and the role of faith in politics, continue to resonate in our modern world. The 100 Years' War didn't just change England and France. It helped create new ways of thinking about power, identity, and belonging that would shape European history for centuries to come. The 100 Years' War profoundly transformed the fabric of medieval society, affecting every level of the social hierarchy from the highest nobles to the humblest peasants. Let's journey through the daily lives of people caught in this century-long struggle. For the common peasants, who made up the vast majority of the population, the war brought unprecedented challenges and horrors. Imagine living in a small farming village, where the distant sound of marching troops would strike terror into every heart. When armies approached, peasants faced an impossible choice: abandon their homes and crops to flee, or risk falling victim to plundering soldiers. These armies, whether friend or foe, would often strip the countryside bare, taking food, livestock, and anything of value. The famous phrase, "burned earth," became all too literal, as scorched earth tactics left entire regions devastated. Life in medieval villages transformed under the constant threat of warfare. Communities developed sophisticated warning systems, with church bells serving as alarm signals. Underground storage became common, as families desperately tried to hide food and valuables from marauding troops. The disruption to agricultural cycles had devastating consequences. Fields left unplanted or harvests abandoned led to widespread famines. Disease followed in war's wake, with the Black Death finding easy prey among displaced and malnourished populations. The merchant class experienced both opportunities and catastrophes during this period. Traditional trade routes through France became increasingly dangerous, forcing merchants to seek alternative paths. Some enterprising traders made fortunes by supplying armies or finding new markets, while others faced ruin when their goods were seized or their markets destroyed. Coastal towns often thrived as maritime trade routes became more important, while inland trading centers could be devastated by shifting military front lines. The transformation of warfare created new social mobility paths, particularly in England. The famous longbowmen, drawn primarily from the yeoman class, gained unprecedented status and wealth through military service. These professional soldiers represented a new social category, neither peasant nor noble, but skilled warriors who could earn significant rewards through military service. Their effectiveness on the battlefield challenged traditional assumptions about nobility and combat prowess. For the nobility, the war demanded difficult choices about loyalty and allegiance. Many nobles held lands in both England and France, creating complex conflicts of interest. The choice of which king to support could mean the difference between prosperity and ruin. This period saw the rise of what historians call bastard feudalism, where traditional feudal bonds were increasingly replaced by paid military service and contractual relationships. The war also accelerated social changes among the knightly class. Traditional knights found themselves adapting to new military realities. The romantic ideal of individual combat gave way to more organized, tactical warfare. Knights had to learn to fight alongside common soldiers and adapt to new weapons and tactics. Some embraced these changes, becoming professional military commanders, while others struggled to maintain traditional forms of warfare. Urban life underwent significant transformations during the war. Cities invested heavily in new fortifications, with many towns taking on massive debt to build or upgrade their walls. This period saw the strengthening of urban militias and the growth of civic identity, as towns often had to defend themselves rather than rely on noble protection. The war also influenced urban governance, with many cities gaining new privileges in exchange for their loyalty and financial support to their chosen side. The role of women also evolved during this long conflict. With men away fighting, women often took on expanded responsibilities in agriculture, trade, and family businesses. In noble households, women frequently managed estates and made crucial political decisions in their husband's absence. Joan of Arc's extraordinary story, while exceptional, reflects broader changes in women's capabilities and public roles during this period. The church played a complex role in daily life during the war. While religious institutions often suffered from warfare and plundering, they also served essential social functions. Monasteries provided refuge for displaced people, managed hospitals for the wounded, and maintained educational systems. The war period saw increased religious fervor, with many people seeking spiritual comfort in uncertain times. Perhaps most significantly, the war accelerated the breakdown of the traditional three-estate system: those who pray, those who fight, and those who work. The emergence of professional soldiers, the rising importance of urban merchants, and the increasing power of royal bureaucracies created new social categories that didn't fit neatly into the old framework. This social evolution laid the groundwork for the more complex class structures of early modern Europe. The impact of the war on education and culture was also profound. The need for administrative personnel to manage the war effort led to increased literacy rates among the middle classes. French gradually replaced Latin as the language of administration in England, while English gained new prestige as a literary language, reflected in works like Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. These social transformations left an indelible mark on European society. The war didn't just redraw political boundaries. It fundamentally altered how people lived, worked, and related to one another. The emergence of more centralized states, professional armies, and new social classes marked the beginning of the transition from medieval to early modern society. The experiences of people at all social levels during this conflict helped shape the world that would emerge from the medieval period. The Hundred Years' War was marked by several pivotal battles and crucial moments that changed not only the course of the conflict but the very nature of warfare in medieval Europe. Let us explore these dramatic turning points that shaped history. The Battle of Crécy in 1346 stands as one of the most revolutionary encounters in military history. On a summer's day in northern France, the English army under Edward III faced a numerically superior French force. What unfolded would shake the foundations of medieval warfare. The English army, significantly outnumbered, took position on a hillside, with their legendary longbowmen arranged in a devastating formation. The French army, confident in their superiority and adhering to the traditional chivalric code, launched a series of ill-coordinated cavalry charges uphill. What happened next was nothing short of revolutionary. The English longbowmen, each capable of launching up to 6 arrows per minute, created a deadly storm of missiles that darkened the sky. The French knights, proud in their expensive armor, found themselves and their horses cut down by this relentless barrage. The muddy battlefield became a chaos of fallen riders and panicked horses. Contemporary chronicles describe the horrible sounds of arrows striking armor and the screams of wounded men and horses. By day's end, the flower of French chivalry lay dead or dying on the field, including the blind King John of Bohemia, who had ordered his knights to tie their horses to his so he could participate in one last charge. Cressy demonstrated that well-trained commoners with longbows could defeat noble knights, challenging centuries of military and social orthodoxy. Nearly 70 years later, the Battle of Agincourt in 1415 would reinforce these lessons in an even more dramatic fashion. Henry V of England, with an army weakened by disease and exhaustion after a long campaign, found himself confronted by a massive French force. The battlefield, hemmed in by woods and recently plowed fields turned to mud by heavy rain, would prove crucial. The French, again confident in their superior numbers and heavy cavalry, attacked across this muddy terrain. The results were catastrophic. The English longbowmen, protected by sharpened stakes driven into the ground, decimated the French knights who found themselves trapped in the mud, their heavy armor becoming a death trap. The slaughter was immense, with thousands of French nobles killed or captured. This victory was so complete that it forced the French crown to negotiate the Treaty of Troyes, which would make Henry V the heir to the French throne. But perhaps the most extraordinary turnaround came with the Siege of Orléans in 1429, centered around the remarkable figure of Joan of Arc. The city of Orléans, a crucial strategic position on the Loire River, had been under English siege for months. The French situation seemed hopeless until the arrival of a 17-year-old peasant girl who claimed divine guidance. Joan's appearance at Orléans transformed the situation. Her conviction and charisma inspired the demoralized French troops, while her tactical insights, which she claimed came from divine visions, proved remarkably sound. Under her leadership, the French forces launched a series of bold attacks that forced the English to abandon the siege. This victory marked the beginning of a dramatic French resurgence. The capture of Joan of Arc in 1430 seemed initially like a devastating blow to the French cause. The English and their Burgundian allies subjected her to a show trial for heresy, hoping to discredit both her and the French king she had helped crown. Her burning at the stake in Rouen in 1431 was intended to demoralize the French resistance. However, her martyrdom had the opposite effect, inspiring increased French resistance and ultimately contributing to their final victory. The Treaty of Troyes in 1420 represented another crucial turning point. This agreement, which made Henry V of England the heir to the French throne, seemed to mark the ultimate triumph of English ambitions. However, its very existence highlighted the fundamental weakness of the English position. Their claim to legitimacy depended on French recognition, which could be withdrawn. The death of Henry V shortly after the treaty, followed by the accession of his infant son Henry VI, created a power vacuum that the French would eventually exploit. The reconquest of Paris by French forces in 1436 marked another decisive shift. The French capital had been under Anglo-Burgundian control for almost 20 years. Its recovery by Charles VII's forces represented both a practical and symbolic victory for the French cause. The city's return to French control demonstrated the growing strength of the reformed French military and the weakening of English power on the continent. These battles and moments highlight a crucial transition in warfare and society. The English victories at Crécy and Agincourt demonstrated the power of new military technologies and tactics, while the French resurgence under Joan of Arc showed how leadership and inspiration could overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. The final French victory, achieved through military reform and political consolidation, marked the emergence of France as a unified nation-state and the end of English continental ambitions. Each of these events contributed to the larger transformation of medieval Europe, as feudal armies gave way to professional soldiers, and traditional concepts of chivalric warfare were replaced by more tactical and technological approaches. The human drama of these moments, from the courage of longbowmen standing against charging knights to the inspiring leadership of Joan of Arc, continues to captivate our imagination and offers timeless lessons about warfare, leadership, and the power of innovation and adaptation in the face of overwhelming odds. The Hundred Years' War wasn't merely a military conflict. It was a catalyst for profound cultural and intellectual transformations that would reshape medieval society. This period witnessed an extraordinary flowering of national identity, literature, art, and religious expression that would help birth the modern European nations we know today. The emergence of distinct national identities during this period marked a revolutionary change in how people viewed themselves and their allegiances. Before the war, a noble might easily identify himself as both English and French, speaking French at court while holding lands in both kingdoms. However, as the conflict intensified, people began to develop stronger national affiliations. In England, this transformation was particularly dramatic. The English language, long considered inferior to French in noble circles, experienced a remarkable revival. The courts began conducting business in English rather than French, and literature in English flourished, most notably in the works of Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, which often reference the ongoing conflict with France. The war sparked an explosion of nationalist literature on both sides. English chronicles celebrated the victories at Crécy and Agincourt, while French writers composed passionate works about resistance to English occupation. The Chronicle of Jean de Venette provided a compelling French perspective on the conflict, while English works like the Siege of Calais celebrated English military prowess. These works weren't just entertainment. They helped shape national consciousness and create enduring narratives about national character and destiny. Military art and architecture underwent revolutionary changes during this period. Traditional castle design evolved to counter new threats, particularly the increasing use of gunpowder weapons. The tall, thin walls of earlier castles gave way to lower, thicker fortifications better able to resist cannon fire. Military manuscripts of the period show increasingly sophisticated diagrams of siege engines, battle formations, and artillery placement, reflecting the growing professionalization of warfare. The war inspired a rich tradition of songs and poetry that captured both the glory and horror of the conflict. English victory songs like Agincourt Carol celebrated triumphs while lamenting the cost of war. French musical traditions included the poignant complaint of the poor commons, which gave voice to the suffering of ordinary people. These cultural expressions weren't merely entertainment. They served as vehicles for propaganda, memory preservation, and emotional processing of the war's trauma. Religious aspects of the conflict were particularly complex and fascinating. The Catholic Church, theoretically neutral, often found itself deeply entangled in the conflict. Bishops and abbots served as military commanders, monasteries functioned as fortresses, and religious rhetoric was used to justify both sides' claims. The Papal Schism of 1378 to 1417, during which rival popes supported different sides in the conflict, further complicated the religious dimension of the war. Prophecy and mysticism played crucial roles in shaping public perception and morale. Prophetic texts circulated widely, with both sides interpreting various prophecies to support their cause. The famous prophecies of Merlin were particularly popular in England, while French prophetic traditions often focused on the return of a saving figure who would drive out the English, a narrative that would later help legitimize Joan of Arc's mission. The story of Joan of Arc represents perhaps the most remarkable intersection of religion, politics, and popular culture during the war. Her claims of divine guidance through visions of saints struck a powerful chord in a society that took supernatural intervention seriously. The French church authorities' careful examination of her claims, followed by their endorsement, gave her mission crucial legitimacy. Even her male clothing, which would later be used against her at her trial, had religious significance, as she claimed it was divinely ordained. Joan's trial and martyrdom transformed her into a powerful symbol that transcended the immediate military conflict. The careful documentation of her trial proceedings provides extraordinary insight into medieval religious thinking and political manipulation of religious authority. Her rehabilitation trial 25 years after her death further emphasized the complex interplay between religion, politics, and national identity. The war period also saw significant developments in intellectual life. Universities continued to flourish despite the conflict, with scholars debating questions of just war, royal authority, and national identity. The need for educated administrators to manage the war effort led to increased literacy rates and the growth of lay education. Legal thinking evolved as well, as lawyers grappled with questions of sovereignty, succession, and international relations. Art and architecture reflected the war's impact, with innovations in both military and civilian construction. Illustrated manuscripts of the period provide vivid depictions of battles and siege warfare, while church architecture increasingly incorporated defensive elements. The period saw the development of distinctly national artistic styles, as French and English artists began to diverge in their approaches. The cultural legacy of the Hundred Years' War extended far beyond its immediate time and place. The nationalist literature, songs, and art it inspired helped create enduring narratives about national character and destiny. The religious debates it sparked contributed to evolving ideas about the relationship between church and state. Perhaps most importantly, the war helped create distinct national cultures that would shape European identity for centuries to come. All these cultural and intellectual developments, from the rise of national languages to the evolution of religious thought, reflected and reinforced the broader transformation of medieval society into something new. The war didn't just change political boundaries. It changed how people thought about themselves, their society, and their relationship to divine and earthly authority. These cultural and intellectual transformations would help lay the groundwork for the Renaissance and the early modern period that followed. The complex web of international relationships and external influences played a pivotal role in shaping medieval and early modern European development. Throughout this period, kingdoms and empires forged intricate alliances that would dramatically alter the course of history. Let's begin with alliances between neighboring kingdoms, which were often cemented through strategic marriages and diplomatic negotiations. These unions served multiple purposes, from ensuring peaceful borders to creating powerful military coalitions. For example, the marriage alliances between English and French nobility during peaceful periods helped stabilize relations between these traditionally rival nations. Similarly, the Habsburg dynasty built an empire through carefully orchestrated marriages, leading to the famous phrase, "Let others wage war. You, happy Austria, marry." Maritime trade evolved significantly during this period, transforming from coastal trading routes into vast networks spanning multiple continents. The emergence of powerful maritime republics like Venice and Genoa revolutionized Mediterranean commerce. These city-states developed sophisticated trading systems, established trading posts across the known world, and created complex financial instruments to facilitate international trade. The Hanseatic League in Northern Europe similarly dominated Baltic and North Sea trade, creating a network of merchant cities that shared common trading practices and mutual protection agreements. The development of military technology during this era was particularly fascinating. The introduction of gunpowder from Asia revolutionized warfare, leading to the development of increasingly sophisticated firearms and artillery. Fortress design evolved in response to these new weapons, with medieval high walls giving way to lower, thicker fortifications better suited to withstanding cannon fire. Naval technology also advanced significantly, with the development of new ship designs like the carrack and galleon that could carry both cargo and artillery, making them suitable for both trade and warfare. The influence on European politics was profound and far-reaching. As kingdoms grew more interconnected through trade and alliances, political decisions in one region could have ripple effects across the continent. The balance of power became increasingly complex, with rulers having to consider not only their immediate neighbors but also distant allies and rivals. The rise of diplomatic missions and permanent ambassadors further formalized these international relationships, creating a sophisticated network of political communication and negotiation. Technological exchange played a crucial role in these international interactions. Ideas and innovations spread along trade routes, leading to the adoption and adaptation of new technologies across different regions. For example, shipbuilding techniques developed in one area would quickly spread to others, leading to rapid advancement in maritime technology. Similarly, military innovations would be studied and improved upon by rival powers, creating a constant cycle of technological evolution. The economic impact of these international interactions cannot be overstated. The development of international banking systems, currency exchange, and credit mechanisms facilitated trade across borders. Luxury goods from distant lands became increasingly available, transforming consumer habits and creating new markets. The wealth generated through international trade helped fund cultural and artistic developments, contributing to movements like the Renaissance. Religious influences also played a significant role in international relations. The Catholic Church served as a unifying force across much of Europe, while also sometimes causing divisions and conflicts. The spread of religious ideas and conflicts, such as the Protestant Reformation, had profound effects on international alliances and rivalries. Over time, these various influences combined to create an increasingly interconnected European continent, where developments in one region could quickly affect others. This interconnectedness laid the groundwork for the modern international system, with its complex web of diplomatic, economic, and cultural relationships. This period of history demonstrates how international interactions and external influences shaped not just political boundaries and military conflicts, but also cultural development, technological advancement, and economic systems. The legacy of these interactions continues to influence international relations today, reminding us that globalization is not a new phenomenon but rather a continuation of historical patterns of human interaction and exchange. The profound impact of medieval and early modern European developments continues to shape our world today in ways that many might not immediately recognize. Let us explore these enduring consequences and their modern connections. The formation of national identities during this period laid the groundwork for modern nationalism. Through shared languages, customs, and historical experiences, distinct cultural identities began to emerge. This process was particularly evident in the consolidation of kingdoms like France and England, where monarchs actively promoted national languages and cultural traditions to strengthen their authority. These early efforts at nation-building created lasting patterns of cultural identity that persist into modern times. Military modernization during this era completely transformed warfare and state organization. The shift from feudal levies to standing armies necessitated new systems of taxation and administration, fundamentally changing the relationship between rulers and subjects. This transformation led to more centralized states with sophisticated bureaucracies, a model that would become the template for modern government organization. The development of firearms and artillery not only revolutionized battlefield tactics but also sparked an arms race that continues to influence military thinking today. The decline of traditional feudalism marked a crucial turning point in European history. As commerce grew and cities expanded, the old system of land-based obligations gave way to more flexible monetary relationships. This economic transformation unleashed new social mobility and created opportunities for the emergence of a middle class. The end of feudalism also contributed to the rise of new political structures, as monarchs consolidated power and developed more centralized administrations. The birth of the modern nation-state represents perhaps the most significant legacy of this period. The emergence of defined borders, centralized bureaucracies, standing armies, and standardized laws created the template for modern government organization. This new political model proved so successful that it spread globally, becoming the predominant form of political organization in the modern world. Looking at present-day connections, we see how issues of nationalism and identity continue to dominate political discourse. Modern debates about immigration, cultural preservation, and national sovereignty echo medieval concerns about loyalty, belonging, and political authority. The way different societies balance national identity with multicultural realities often reflects patterns established centuries ago. Technology's role in warfare continues to evolve, much as it did during the medieval period. Just as gunpowder transformed medieval warfare, modern innovations in cyber warfare, drone technology, and artificial intelligence are reshaping military strategy. The fundamental relationship between technological advancement and military power remains as relevant today as it was centuries ago. The role of women in leadership has seen fascinating parallels across time. Medieval queens like Eleanor of Aquitaine and Isabella of Castile demonstrated that women could exercise significant political power despite social constraints. Today's ongoing discussions about gender equality and women in positions of power echo these historical precedents, showing both how far we've come and the challenges that remain. Public opinion's importance in governance, which began to emerge during this period with the rise of literacy and urban centers, has become absolutely crucial in modern democratic societies. The development of printing and the spread of information in medieval times prefigured today's concerns about media influence and information control in the digital age. These complex changes teach us valuable lessons about the nature of social transformation. Major societal shifts, whether in medieval times or today, rarely happen suddenly. Instead, they emerge through gradual processes of adaptation and response to changing circumstances. Understanding this historical pattern helps us better comprehend and navigate current social changes. Moreover, studying this period reveals the interconnected nature of social, economic, and technological change. Just as medieval innovations in agriculture led to population growth, urbanization, and eventual political transformation, today's technological revolution continues to reshape our social and political landscape in profound ways. Today's global challenges, from climate change to technological disruption, require us to understand how societies have historically adapted to major changes. The medieval period's transformation from feudal to early modern society offers valuable insights into how societies can successfully navigate periods of intense change while maintaining social cohesion. The lessons of this era remain remarkably relevant to our modern world. Whether we're dealing with questions of national identity, technological change, gender roles, or public opinion, the patterns and precedents established during this transformative period continue to influence our present-day experiences and challenges. By studying this rich historical legacy, we gain valuable insights into managing contemporary social and political transformations.